Fan of pro wrestling, comedy, and combat sports? Then we have the podcast for you because we cover that and much, much more.
Do you like to debate with your friends? Do we have the perfect segment for you? It's the 531, where we take any given subject, break it down to a top 5. From there, we debate it down to 3, and then into that number 1 spot.
If you want to get a hold of us, find us on our social medias. Search Working Fans Podcast on any major social media platform. And if you want to find the podcast, search for us on any major podcast platform, as well as YouTube.
Working Fans Podcast. We put in the work so you don't have to.
Fans, welcome back to Working Fans Saturday, episode 57. We got a big double episode for you today. We have author Kevin Kelton, who has written on Saturday Night Live, National Lampoon's, Fridays, Night Court. He also wrote the book Super Vows and is involved with the More Perfect Union podcast. As always, we are brought to you by the Pro Wrestling Vault Volume 1, 35 short stories from across the wrestling landscape, available at wrestleville.com and lancebychance.com. Let me play this feature intro, and then we will get into this interview. Shit, let me take this overlay real quick. Kevin, thank you for joining us today. I became familiar with you through the More Perfect Union podcast, which I debuted on last week. Definitely stepped outside of my comfort zone, but it's fun. And me and Dave were talking. We have a co-host out sick with COVID, so we figure, why not bring in the big guns for an interview?
Happy to be here. Thank God for COVID.
Kevin, I guess we want to start off right in the beginning. What got you started? What attracted you to this, actually?
To comedy writing?
Comedy writing. What attracted you to this? Yeah, what got you in this field?
You know, growing up, my brothers and I were always like fans of stand-up, just as you guys are. And we used to do little improvs in the house. We didn't know the word improv. We called them games, but they were improvs. And then when I was in college, my older brother, Bobby, started doing stand-up comedy, first in Los Angeles, and then he moved back to New York to get more stage time. And I was helping him write his act. So I would go with him to the clubs at night. You know, I was 19, 20 years old. What could be more fun than going and hanging out at comedy clubs with other comics, right? And I would sit there, I'd watch the shows, and then I would hang out with the comics after the clubs closed. And I was helping him and his friends hone their acts. And I kind of learned how to write comedy just hanging out with these guys.
Wow. Now, who was in the clubs? Like, who did you get to hang out with around that time? And who did you get to see perform live?
My brother's best friend from like 1975 to 1978 or longer was Larry David.
Oh,
I was around Larry David constantly. You know, Seinfeld I knew, Jay Leno I knew, Paul Reiser, Larry Miller. I'm forgetting names, but all of these guys were just, I was little Kelton. I was Bobby's little brother, and I was allowed to hang out with the gang.
That's got to be crazy to be able to hear greats like that on a nightly basis, or just see how they think and how they joke.
Yeah. And then when I got out of college, I moved out to California. And after I was a bank teller for a few months just to make some money and get my own place. But after that, I started working at the Comedy Store as a doorman and an MC. And I was there, 5-6 nights a week, 7 hours at a time, just watching other stand-ups. So again, it was like going to college, comedy college.
How important was, obviously you can work hard, but how was important just the timing of being around all those guys at that particular time?
Oh, great question. It was invaluable. I mean, I always tell people that I lucked out in my life because I have, I had that old line from Taken, I have a very particular set of skills. Well, mine isn't killing people. I have this set of skills that I learned to sit around a conference table and make other people laugh in the conference room. And I always tell people, if I had that skill in the 1800s or the 1920s, I'd have been the asshole out in the farm just trying to make the donkeys laugh,
Yeah.
And because I came of age in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, I was able to take that little skill in the world and turn it into a full-blown career.
That's amazing. Now, how was it to work at the Comedy Store? Because in comedy, that's like one of those sacred places that for so many people, it's important to be past there. The people that they get to see, you make lifelong friends there. So what was your experience at the Comedy Store?
I made lifelong friends there. Now, when I started in New York, the clubs were the Improv, Catch a Rising Star, and the Comic Strip. Those were the three main clubs in the 70s. And of course, Caroline's and Dangerfields came a little later. And now I think there's a place called the Comedy Cellar. But those first three were kind of like my home base when I started in New York. When I came out to LA, it was the Comedy Store and the Improv, also in Hollywood. I liked the Improv a little bit better because I just felt more at home there. I became a regular there, whereas at the Comedy Store, I was just sort of an MC/open micer. I never became a full-fledged official regular there, although I did some sets. But the friends that I made, again, many of them are still my good friends to this day. Some are no longer with us, but people that I was very close to, Bob Schimmel, Bob Saget, who just passed this week. We hung out. I went to his home. We went to Disneyland together, just people that I hung out with. And this is before they were famous. They were just other guys that I was starting out with.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. I mean, so it's not even just your success. It's not only just like hard work, timing, but I think also networking, right? You're meeting the right people.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. My first TV job, again, I was known as Bobby's little brother, and I did stand up at the Comedy Store. And a guy named Mark Berkowitz, who changed his name professionally to Mark Summers, because this was right after David Berkowitz had kind of ruined that last name for the nation. I don't know whether you guys remember him. He was son of Sam.
Yes. Right. When I heard that name, I'm like, ooh, that's an unfortunate.
It was sad. I remember Mark Summers. I'm like, oh yeah, double hair.
Yeah. So his real name is Mark Berkowitz. But anyways, great guy. Well, he was a stand-up there, and he also was getting a lot of writing gigs on game shows. And one day he says to me, I got offered a potential job. I'm too busy to take it. It's on this show, Crosswits. I told them about you. Do you want me to tell them about you? I said, sure. So he sets up this interview. I go in for the interview, and I got to backtrack this story. A couple of months before this meeting, at that time, the dating game was using a lot of stand-up comedians as bachelors. And I was on the dating game. Okay. So now 6 months later, I go into this meeting, and as I walk in the door, this producer says to me, Kevin, I got to apologize to you up front. But after we set this meeting, we went and hired another writer. So the position you're here for is filled. But since you already drove down here, why don't we sit and chat, and who knows what comes of it? I said, sure. I was already there, right? We start talking, and he goes, you look familiar to me. And I said, yeah, you kind of look familiar to me too. And we start playing what we call Jewish geography in New York, which is, did you ever go here? Did you go to this school? Did you ever? And after like several rounds of that questioning, he goes, did you ever audition for the dating game? I said, yeah, I did the dating game several months ago. He said, I was at your audition. You're a funny dude. Because I was funny in the audition. I stunk on the real show, but I was funny in the audition. And based on that, he recommended me to another guy, and I got my first job off of that.
Wow, that's amazing. And that's kind of how you broke into the TV business?
That was my first gig, was on a game show called Face the Music. It was sort of like Name That Tune, but you had to take the song titles and write funny puzzles using the song titles. And that's what the writing staff did. So I did that, and then I went back to Face the Music. I did a full season there in 1980. I went back for a second season there, and 4 weeks into the second season, I got the job at Fridays. And so I became a comedy writer.
Wow. Now, what was that experience on Fridays? Because that is probably a forgotten show outside of if you're an Andy Kaufman fan and you're familiar with the incident with him during that. And that was a show starring Larry David too, right?
Larry was one of the cast members, and it was just a coincidence that we were working on the same show because I had known him. Again, he was a family friend many years before that. He had nothing to do with me getting the job. It was just a coincidence. It was a fun experience. It was a little tough being my first comedy writing job because the pressure to turn out material is really, really difficult, And I was able to just keep my head above water, but maybe not good enough. I only did one season there, probably because I didn't get enough stuff on the air. Although last year I did another podcast talking about this. And after the podcast, the host told me he spoke to another writer on the show and found out that they let me go because I was one of the very few writers that didn't do drugs and they didn't feel comfortable around me.
Wow.
They thought I was like a narc or something.
Wow. Imagine that being the thing that disqualifies you. But it sounds almost like comedy's a little like pro wrestling where the society is upside down. Different things are valued, and just how you would approach that particular thing is that's funny though to hear.
Yeah, I was the straight-laced guy that when I went into the other writers' rooms, so they were all filled with smoke. It was like a bad sketch, And I was the one that was coughing and going, I got to get some fresh air. I never did. I did grass a couple of times in college, but only when somebody handed me a joint. I never bought it and never used it myself. I never saw cocaine until many years later. So I was just like this, this straight-laced arrow with a button-down shirt on this show with all of these druggies. But Fridays was a terrific writing staff, a terrific cast, had a lot of fun there, learned a lot. Now, I left the show just weeks before the Andy Kaufman incident, but I can tell you that was all staged. If you have any doubts about whether that was real or not, of course it wasn't real. It's Andy.
God, and I'm such an Andy Kaufman mark that it's like the wrestling fan in me should know it was set up.
Oh,
but then there's that little bit of doubt, and it's like I want to believe in Andy that it's like you almost want it to be true.
I'll tell you a quick Andy Kaufman story. Now, like I said, I was hanging out at the Improv in the mid to late 70s with my brother before I got into the business. And one night, Andy was emceeing at the Improv, and he was emceeing in one of his characters. Now, I don't know whether you ever saw Andy do stand-up, pure stand-up, but he would try to annoy the audience, just like he did on Fridays in the mock sketch. He would try to piss off the audience. That was his goal, whereas other people wanted to get the audience to laugh. He wanted to get people to want to kill him, okay? So this one night, it was sort of a Tony Clifton character before Tony Clifton had been invented. He was wearing like a tuxedo, and he was this obnoxious character. I forget what name he was using. And, he would bring people on stage and be doing some mock bit, and then he would throw water on one of the people, and they'd want to hit him, and the bouncers would have to break it up. And it was all staged, okay? But he did this one bit that, to me, is one of the funniest things I ever saw. At one point, he goes up. Now, remember, he's the MC of the show, right? Bringing the acts on and off. So an act finishes, he goes up and he goes, I see you folks, you're laughing at everybody else. You're not laughing at me. So we're going to try something different. If you don't think I'm funny, maybe I could, instill a little culture in you people. And he takes out The Great Gatsby, the actual book, opens it. He says, we're going to read The Great Gatsby. He opens it to page 1 and starts reading. And Dave, Joe, I'm telling you, he didn't read a paragraph. He didn't read a page. He gets like 2 or 3 pages into the novel. And the audience is going, hey, you know what? The guys, guys on dates who were dropping money to, show their girl a good time. They're going, get the, off the stage, you asshole, you blanking, idiot. They're ready to kill him. And I'm watching this in the back of the room. Now, I know it's a put on. And I'm watching this slowly evolved to the point where this could really turn into something violent. And at one point, they're all yelling at him, and Andy stops reading. He looks at the audience like a teacher, looks around, and shakes his head. He goes, people, and he flips through the pages of the book. He goes, we have this far to go. And the entire room broke into laughter. It was the greatest laugh I've ever remembered in my 45 years in the business.
That's such a good story. And it makes so much sense why he went into pro wrestling as a heel, because it just seems like getting that reaction was what entertained him, and being able to do it to such a level.
Yeah. Well, when I was a doorman at the Comedy Store a couple of years later, Andy in the main room at the Comedy Store, this is in Los Angeles, was wrestling women on stage. That's where he got into it. Yeah. And he was developing that whole thing by wrestling women on stage.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what was it like to be there live, to hear that, to experience that? How was the crowd taking it?
Oh, they loved it. They loved it. I mean, people were reacting like it was wrestling because they kind of knew that it was a bit.
Right.
So they went with it. And, some of the women, I don't know whether they were plants. I think some of them were really just women who thought, this guy's a loudmouth, I'm going to teach him a lesson. And it would get pretty intense. They were really wrestling on stage. But Andy was always doing stuff like this. At the same time, Robin Williams had just blown up. Mork and Mindy had just started, and he had blown up his career. And these guys were in the Comedy Store all the time. Letterman was there. Leno was there. Gary Shandling wasn't even a big name yet. And I was just immersed in all of this.
Wow, those are some heavy hitters to be coming up and just learning around. Like, the amount of comedy that must hit you accidentally at that point has got to be, like, invaluable.
Just through osmosis, you learn. Now, not everybody that I knew and worked with there went on to have solid careers. A lot did, but a lot didn't. And, I realized pretty early on that my skill level or my skill set was not stand-up. I was competent. I could get on stage and make a club audience laugh, but I was never going to be a really great stand-up. And I figured that out early on. So I went into writing, which was really where my passion was.
Now, how do you come to a point where you're able to apply for Saturday Night Live and get on there?
Okay, so I did Fridays, which was already a live sketch comedy show. And then I got several more sketch comedy jobs after that. I did a Steve Martin special called Twilight Theater. Excuse me. I did something called Laugh Tracks that Howie Mandel was on, and a couple of other very funny people, and a few other shows like that. And so I was already a working pro. My agent said, it was the summer of 1983. My agent said, SNL is looking for people. Why don't you put together what they need, a sample packet. That's what they call it. So I put together, 4 or 5 sketches into this packet. She sent it to SNL. She calls me up. She says they liked it. They want to talk to you on the phone. I was in Los Angeles. They set up this phone interview. I'm talking with the producers. It's a typical interview. Tell us about yourself. Tell us how you got into the business. Tell us what you like to do. And then at the end, they said, look, we like your stuff, but we're not there yet. Why don't you write a couple of more things? Give us 3 more pieces by the end of the week. So I'm talking to them like on a Monday or a Tuesday. And they say, why don't you get us a few more pieces by the end of the week? And I realized what they were doing was they were testing me to see if I could write on deadline, because they probably figured correctly that I just reached into my trunk of existing sketches for the packet that I sent them. So they wanted to see what I had that I could turn out, on under pressure. So in 48 hours, I wrote 3 more sketches. I didn't wait till the end of the week. I got it to them 2 days early, and my agent sent them in. They liked it. I got the job.
Nice.
Wow.
Now, I was just gonna ask. I'm curious, not to get into money, but was this financially a game changer being a part of SNL, or it was just?
Yeah. And by the way, I don't mind talking about money at all, really. So I'll tell you. My first year there, and again, this is the mid-'80s, so these numbers are not going to seem like a lot of money, but they were a good amount of money to me at the time. I was making, I think, $3,250 per episode. So you multiply that out by 20 episodes. What is that? That's not even $50,000, right? I don't know, but
I'm not good with math. I was going to try
70.
doing it.
I'm sorry, I'm thinking of 10. It's like almost 70 some odd thousand.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, it's over 50.
Yeah, I was thinking 10 instead of 20. But for a young kid, and I was able to get a decent place in New York, not too expensive.
Right.
It was enough to be in the green, in the black. My second year, I got a big bump in pay because I delivered. So yeah, financially it was a game changer. I still wasn't making six figures, but right soon after that, I jumped into the six-figure, range, and then it took off exponentially from there.
Wow. Now, what was it like to be at SNL? Were you a fan before going there? I hear it's a crazy environment to work with, and just because you have such a wild schedule and you got a week to get that show out.
Right. Well, that is true, but it's also very much a well-oiled machine, especially when I was there. I was there in seasons 9 and 10. The show was already so professional that the crew, they were just unbelievable. They could do anything in a day. So it was never like, how are we going to do this? It was just a question of getting enough material to fill the show. So the schedule, and this, many articles and books have been written about this. You probably know it. You have Monday and Tuesday night to write the show. You meet with the host on Monday afternoon. It's a song and dance meeting where people pretend they have ideas. Usually you got nothing, but you sell them that you've got ideas so that they don't, go home back to their hotel in a panic and quit. And then we go to our offices and start spitballing ideas and coming up with sketch ideas, and then you write them out. Monday night is a late night. Tuesday night, very late night. Sometimes I didn't leave the office until 7 or 8 or 9 in the morning on Wednesday. Then you come back in the afternoon for the read through, the table read. And, they've got 30, 40 sketches. They all get read out loud, and then the producers go off and they pick the 8 or 10 that they want in the show.
Wow. Now, what was your favorite thing that you wrote there, or your favorite piece that you were involved with?
Well, there's no one favorite, but I guess among my favorites, I wrote something for Jim Belushi called The High School Chess Coach. And the premise was he was a coach of a high school chess team, but he was like Bobby Knight, constantly throwing fits, throwing chairs, kicking the chairs when he was upset, yelling from the sidelines. So I wrote that piece, and that got a pretty good reaction, and it's shown a lot in clip shows. I wrote a piece for Billy Crystal right after the We Are the World video. You guys probably remember Michael Jackson and all of the celebrities in We Are the World.
Yeah.
Which was a big, big cultural thing at the time. To you, it's just history, but it was a huge part of the culture at the time. And I had read in the papers after this thing came out that the reason Prince wasn't there, and that was a big deal, that for some reason Prince didn't show up that night, was he claimed that his bodyguards had got arrested at some club and he had to go bail them out. It was bullshit. Prince just didn't want to do it because he didn't want to share the stage with anyone else. But that was his PR story. So it occurred to me, this guy has such a big ego that he probably wants to do his own video. So I wrote this piece for Billy Crystal to do as Prince called I Am Also the World. and I wrote this little song, and we had other people doing impressions coming in, just like in the We Are the World video. And that worked pretty well. That was on the show that Hulk Hogan and Mr. T co-hosted. Awesome. So those are two, but there were a lot of sketches that I liked.
I'm curious. When I was looking through your credentials and stuff, I was a big fan of the Jeffersons growing up. We'd watch shows like that, me and my dad. And I saw you got to write on an episode, and I'm just curious. One, how was that experience? And two, how does that happen where you only write for like an episode? Are you contracted? Like, hey, let's just write this one episode, or?
Yeah, good question. So this was actually the same. This was a year before. Oh, let me back. 1982. I was only working on sketch comedy at the time, right? I didn't really break into sitcoms until the late 80s. But I did get some meetings to go out and pitch ideas for sitcoms because I had written spec scripts. I wanted to work on sitcoms. And so one of the shows I go in on is the Jeffersons. So when you're going in as what they call a freelance writer, you're not hired yet, but you're going in to pitch them ideas. You go in and you have 6, 8, 10, 12 ideas, and you sit in a room with the producers and you pitch them one after one, and they knock them out, or they say, hey, there might be something there. And sometimes you get lucky and you get an assignment. Well, I went in and I pitched to these two producers, Peter Casey and David Lee. And they liked one idea, which was a Christmas episode idea, but they already had their Christmas episode for that year. But everything else, they said they'd either done something like it before, or it wasn't quite right for the show. So I go off and I go about my life. Months go by, don't think about it. And then the same summer that I ultimately got SNL, about 2 weeks before I got SNL, I get a call from my agent saying, Peter Casey and David Lee want to talk to you again. They want to call you. So I'd say, yeah, give them my number. They call me up. They say, Kevin, we got some good news and some bad news for you. You remember that Christmas story idea that you pitched us a year and a half ago? I said, yeah, of course I do. They said, well, we couldn't use it then because we already had a Christmas episode, but we want to use it this season for our Christmas episode this year. That's the good news. The bad news is we need to turn it around in like 48 hours. So we don't have time to farm out the script to you. We're just going to give you story credit, and we're going to write the story in-house, the script in-house. At the time, I had a really bad flu. I was like on my deathbed. And to me, it was like, this is the only good thing that's happened to me all week. I said, sure, whatever, guys. You know, you could have just stolen it. They didn't do that. They had the ethics to call me up, say, we remember that story, and we're going to give you story credit on it. So I said, yeah, whatever. So I just got paid for that storyline. It says story by Kevin Kelton, and it says Teleblade by somebody else. And that was my first sitcom credit, but I really had, other than the premise, I had nothing to do with it.
Wow. Now, how did you get involved with Boy Meets World, Night Court? And then soon we're going to get into your book and talk about the podcast here.
Great. So after SNL, I kept doing sketch shows because, you know, you get typecast as a writer, just like you get typecast as an actor. And I was having trouble breaking into sitcoms. But in the late 80s, I was able to cross over and start getting sitcom jobs, which is really where I knew my skill set was. It's a different type of writing and a different set of skills. And I always knew that I was more cut out for sitcoms than I was for sketches. But, you know, you get pigeonholed. So I finally broke in. I did a Fox series called Women in Prison. I think that was my first half-hour credit. That lasted like one season. Then I did a short-lived series for NBC called Night and Day with Lowell Gans and Babalu Mandel. They were the showrunners, but that only lasted like 4 or 6 episodes. Then I did a Dick Van Dyke series, believe it or not. That only lasted, I think, 8 or 9 episodes. That wasn't a great writing experience, although Dick was wonderful to work with. And then I got A Different World, and then Night Court, and then I did several other shows. And then one season, my agent called me and said, we sent your script out to a lot of places. The show that wants to meet you is Boy Meets World. I said, I've never seen Boy Meets World. I don't watch TGIF shows. The only thing I know about Boy Meets World is that my friend Bob Saget has a different show on it. Not Boy Meets World, TGIF.
Yeah.
But I said, you know, you're going for the interview. So I went in, I got the job. I was a Boy Meets World writer.
Wow. Like when I told my buddy about that, he's like, holy shit. I'm like, I know, because me and him watched it growing up. So to find out that somebody that invited me on to help with their podcast wrote with Boy Meets World, I'm like, hold on.
It's so funny to hear the experience, though, because for you, it was like, I don't even know if I want to do this. But
for me, I wanted to be working on Friends, Frasier, News Radio, Larry Sanders, you know, Seinfeld. So I was the disenchanted writer there. I look back on it now and I realize I was just being a prima donna because it was a very good show. It wasn't at that level of the other, you know, the more cutting edge shows, but it was a good show and its fan base loves it to this day.
Yeah, it even spawned a recent remake.
Yes. So, but at the time, I think I was a little bit jaded, but I did 2 seasons there. I did half a season because I came on in the middle of the 94-95 season. And then the 96-97 season, I was there. Yeah. And now, again, great cast, terrific writing staff. Michael Jacobs, a joy to work for, So in retrospect, I feel very blessed to have worked there.
Nice. Now, how hard is the writing game? Because it sounds like you do a lot of work or you see a lot of jobs. You've got things that you hope for, but then there's things that just come to you. Is it as cutthroat as an industry as it almost sounds?
Oh, yeah. It's a lot of work. It's cutthroat. I'm not sure I would use that term, but it's very competitive. There's a lot of disappointment. You have to be able to take rejection. And I won't go into details, but there were like little things that were like almost fell into place that didn't, that I still look back and go, man, I wish I'd gotten a little bit of a break there and gotten on that. Like I really wanted Mad About You. And I wrote a spec Mad About You script. And my agent sent it out. I think I got a different world off of my Mad About You script, which is not, couldn't be totally more different shows.
Yeah.
The next year, I go in for an interview for Night Court for a potential writing job. And the two guys who were running Night Court the year before had been the executive producers of Mad About You. And when I went in for the interview, they told me, we loved your Mad About You script. If we had seen that last year, we would have hired you. I said, I thought it was sent to you guys. They said, no, we never saw it.
Oh. So hearing like things like that, that's got to be like, oh, if only like.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, how did you come about to writing your own book, which we have right here, Super Vows? Thank
you for plugging it. So, after my television career slowed up, because obviously I don't do any television now, but in the 2000s, it slowed up quite a bit because of whatever, age or lack of talent or whatever. So I started looking at other forms of writing, and I had started working on that novel in the year 2000 or 2001. And I got 85 pages into it, and then I went back to other writing projects and never got back to it. And this past year or the year before, I realized, hey, you know what? I should finish that sucker. So I finished this novel, and it turned out to be my first complete novel. And I self-published it. I'm incredibly proud of it, because unlike television or the movie business or sketch comedy, your material always has to be interpreted through the talents of actors and directors and set designers and everything else. And everybody has input into your words. You write a novel, it's yours. People like it, they don't like it, but that is me. That is Kevin Kelton. It will endure in the zeitgeist forever as a sample of what I can do as a writer without having actors or directors or everybody else determining what works and what doesn't.
Now that's got to feel like a big accomplishment. How did you come around to podcasting? Because we'll end on this note. You are a part of the More Perfect Union podcast, Real Debate Without the Hate.
Yeah. So I'm really into politics, just like you guys are into wrestling or into comedy. Was always talking about it with friends, was always posting about it on Facebook. Then in 2014, I realized that the bitterness that now is so pervasive about political discussions, it was starting out then. It was getting really toxic. And I noticed that my timeline was becoming like a really kind of negative place. And I said, I still want to talk about politics, but I don't want I like, seeing pictures of people's puppies and their food, Yeah. So I decided to make a political group where people could just discuss politics and it would be separate from my timeline. So I created this group called Open Fire Politics. And the group is still going, but that was in 2014 or something. And soon after that, somebody in the group said, hey, does anybody want to do a political podcast? I knew nothing about podcasting, but I volunteered as one of the people. 4 or 5 of us started this podcast, just like you guys do a roundtable podcast. And it's endured. We've now been doing it for, we started in September of 2014. So we're well past the 7-year mark. No, 2015, excuse me. So we're past the 6-year mark, I guess. And it's, we've gone through a lot of co-hosts, a lot of cast changes, but I'm still there churning them out. And now Joe is part of the family, and we're really happy for that.
Yeah, it's done with Greg Matuzik and Ward. Oh, I'm blanking on his last name.
Anderson.
Thank you. And it was really fun to go on. And part of the reason that I was interested in it was it was political, so it was getting outside of my comfort zone, but you kept saying like it's going to be fun, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And then we get in there, we talk politics, and it wasn't hard at all. And it was wild to be in there with guys that were more experienced than me at this, because me and Dave, it seems like a lot of the podcasts we do, people have been doing it about the same amount of time, and we have about the same credentials. So to come in and be involved with you guys, I was like, oh, wow, this is big time here tonight.
Well, you're very complimentary and maybe a little too kind, but I'm so glad that we found you and you found us, and now that you're part of the MPU family, looking forward to doing another podcast with you there probably this weekend. And Dave, I'm never going to see you again, so
Actually, I just wanted to say a couple things. One, I love the name because debate without the hate. Like, I love that because it's so true. Everything that has a negative, even not just politics, any kind of online debates, it's so toxic right now.
yeah.
And the other thing I have to say, I listened to the episode, Joe was on it. So I was like, okay, let me take a look at it. And as somebody who doesn't follow a ton of politics, easy listen, flew right by. Really, I recommend it to people. And I said, just give it a shot. I said, it's an easy listen. It's, that's the best thing I could say. It was a lot of fun.
We try to make it light. I've got somewhat of a comedy background. Ward Anderson is a stand-up comedian and a writer and a producer. Greg is just a school teacher, but one of the most naturally funny people I've ever met. And we just have a good time talking about the news of the week or what we're watching on TV or what's going on in sports, just like you guys do. It's just a light, breezy little podcast that our fan base seems to like. So thank you for letting me plug it. Again, it's called the More Perfect Union Podcast. You can find us at mpupodcast.com. And I'm going to plug my book one more time, Super Vows. It's on Amazon. It's a dark comedy. It is not for the kiddies. Don't buy it for your 13 or 14-year-old kids. There are some adult passages in there, but it is, if you like dark satire, it draws more on my SNL more on my National Lampoon background than on, Boy Meets World. So people, please go to Amazon and look for that. I'd love to sell you a book and love to be part of your bookcase.
Well, Kevin, thanks for joining us. Guys, we're going to run a quick commercial, and then we're going to talk some Impact pay-per-view from this weekend. Kevin,
I'm going to come back sometime, and we're going to talk martial arts because I'm also a third-degree black belt. I'll bet you didn't know that.
Oh, wow. We might have to get you on the combat cast. Well, Kevin, awesome, thank you again, and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you, guys. I really.
You West the competition. Bring on the competition. We need some competition. Y'all ain't no competition. It's time to ball. Yeah, shout it, time to brawl. Cause see, we about to stomp y'all from the jump fall. Me worried not at all. Your team is gonna fall. Hope you learn something from it. Cause we schooling all of y'all. Putting you to shame. Don't hate you even came. Bringing the pain to anybody coming through the lane. Simple and plain. We gon' play it like we playing dames. Ain't got a chance. Even if we give away the game. So hope you brought your best. Go put your skills to the test. An early off season. About to lay your team to rest. Talk is another loss. That's what it's gonna cost. Go with your instincts if you're having second thoughts. Your buck, this is where it stops, player. From the point to the center, whole team got hops, player. We be the kings of this division. Here to knock you out the box, player. Just wait until I get the rock, player. We tired of playing losers. Oh, y'all think y'all some winners? No matter who we up against.
Well, Dave, when the AJ is away, we go Broadway.
Oh, dude, we going all night long. Woo!
That was a fun interview. I had a feeling it would go long. That guy has been everywhere. And we wanted to give Working Fans Saturday a little bit different of a feel because we always talk wrestling, but that don't mean we ain't going to do it today because
we ain't cultured. Get the fuck out of here. We got other skills.
We got this much to go.
Bring it on, baby. I'm ready. One of my favorite Impact shows in a long, long time.
I forgot the name of it.
Hard to Kill.
Hard to Kill 2022, live from the factory in Dallas, Texas. This, just like you said, really good pay-per-view, starting off with Chelsea Green versus Tasha Steelz versus Lady Frost versus Jordan Grace versus Alicia versus Rosemary. Knockouts, Ultimate X match. I didn't get the cage match to write these times down, but this first one flew by. I really enjoyed it. I thought they lived up to the high-flying exploits that you'd expect in an Ultimate X match.
First off, I got America's #1 news source, Wikipedia, in front of me, and it has it on as 9 minutes.
I'll take
And,
it sometimes.
I thought this was an easy match. Flowed really well. Happy for Tasha Steelz. I don't know. I mean, you couldn't have picked out. I don't want to be mean to Alicia Edwards, but except for Alicia Edwards, like any of these girls would have been great to win. Like Chelsea, Jordan, Lady Frost, Rosemary. I'm kind of a Rosemary guy. I really like the work she's doing. But pretty cool to see Tasha get the nod and see where they go with her.
I would almost argue that's why Alicia fits in perfectly, because she's somebody you don't want to get that spot. So she fits in the match just as much as anybody that you would want to get it. But yeah, Lady Frost showing off, Chelsea Green, amazing. Tasha Steelz deserving the win. This was followed up by Tom Hannafin throwing to a trailer for the free fall.
Yes.
And I got to admit, this felt so WWE-like.
Right.
But Tom threw to it in such a way, probably because he's had to do it for so long.
Oh, yeah.
And if you don't have somebody in your ear, it's like, sell them on this trailer. And the way he said it, I got pulled into the trailer, and now I want to see this movie. So
yeah, it was actually like a good trailer, which is funny because we're used to such crap whenever there's cross promotion with this stuff. It's usually like movies you would never want to see.
But it was such a good trailer and such a professional throw that you're
like, D'Lo was like, I want to see that movie.
Yeah,
they really
did. They did so good. And then you come back to the table. D'Lo and Tom go over that night's card. And just listen to this card. Jonathan Gresham versus Chris Sabin for the ROH title. Trey Miguel versus Steve Macklin for the X Division title. Good Brothers and Violent by Design versus Heath, Rhino, Eddie Edwards, Mac, and Swan in Hardcore War.
Yeah.
The Walking Weapon, Josh Alexander versus Mass Destruction, Jonah. Moose versus Matt Cardona versus W. Morrissey for the Impact Championship. And then Mickie James versus Deonna Perazzo for the Knockouts Women's Championship in a Texas death match. Like,
smart
just them writing down this card gave me the chills.
Yeah, and smart that ended up being the main event too, Mickie Perazzo. We'll get to it later, but with the buzz of Mickie going into Rumble, I was online a lot that night, and people were talking, oh, they're going to take the belt off her because they won't allow her to go to the Rumble with it. So it became a big discussion. Will she have the belt? Will she not? And I think that was a good way to end up main event and putting that match on last, but we'll get there.
Yeah, I mean, this was followed by a Mickie James promo where she basically makes known Texas deathmatch rules, because you hear deathmatch and you assume they're going through like cows and shit. If it's Texas, like maybe some cactuses, but it's just getting to your feet for a 10 count after a pin or submission.
Right.
So adds a different kind of way to this match. Deonna Perazzo.
It does. And I will put that over a little bit later too, because there's some stuff I really like about this. But yes.
Yep. Deonna Perazzo backstage, name dropping the Royal Rumble, really looking annoyed that she's not the champion, really living that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Totally what she should be doing as a heel. You know, your 15 minutes of fame is going to be up. I think she made a comment. It's excellent. Yeah.
The next match, Trey Miguel versus Steve Macklin, X Division Championship on the line. If Macklin loses, he cannot go for the title against Miguel again. I thought Macklin came out the gate hot. And this was a way that it's like, based on this match, I'm like, ooh, I think this pay-per-view is picking up.
Tell you, not to make comparisons to like WWE or say anything about them, but what's interesting is ever since the Rascals came to WWE as MSK and they left Trey behind, not that they left him behind, but Trey's been the company. Trey has been, to me, had another level of how he performs, like a lot more fire, it feels like, in the ring. And Macklin, who just came off of that WWE run, that like Sons of Anarchy type gimmick he had, he looked like motivated too. Like these looked like two young guys that are motivated right now and want to make their move.
Maybe Miguel made the better move not going to WWE if it was his choice.
Absolutely. Whatever the case, he's performing at another level, I feel, and he's shining right now. And Yeah, I thought this was a great match. And with the stipulation, you wondered, okay, is Macklin going to win? And no,
Yeah.
kept it on Trey.
Now, at the bottom of this match, they ran a ticker that was the Road to Rebellion. January 9th, they're in Dallas, Texas for an Impact TV taping. January 21st in Fort Lauderdale. Now, February 19th, there's a no surrender event, followed by February 20th tapings for Impact in New Orleans. March 5th is the Sacrifice event. March 6th, an Impact taping. Those are both in Louisville, Kentucky. And then March 18th and 19th, Philadelphia, Impact TV tapings. This is the Road to Rebellion, and Rebellion is announced later in the show. Following this, Tennille Dashwood and Madison Rayne, I guess they're known as the Influence backstage.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't familiar with them. I haven't watched a lot of Impact lately because I think the last event I remember really watching was that one where they were supposedly returning with fans, and the crowd just didn't look so good. And I was like, I like their pay-per-views, but I'm laying off their TV. This event made me want to go watch the TV.
Yeah.
Because after that promo, you had Jonathan Gresham versus Chris Sabin
There we go.
for the ROH Championship. Ian Riccaboni on commentary, Bobby Cruz ring announcer.
Love it.
ROH pure rules in effect. Every match begins and ends with a code of honor. Each wrestler has 3 rope breaks. After that, if you're under the ropes, it's not going to break the hold. Closed fist punches to the face, not permitted. 1 warning, then you get DQ'd. There will be a 20 count when a wrestler is on the floor. I had great match, capital on all of great. I would call this 5-star, early contender for match of the year, and I think Jonathan Gresham is going to continue laying down matches to this degree.
He's amazing. He's a throwback to like an old school NWA traveling champion to me. I love that, through a negative comes a positive. Ring of Honor, the future's unknown, but here's Gresham taking that Ring of Honor title around, and he's defending it, and he's putting on these excellent matches. Again, going by America's #1 source here, I have this match as 12 minutes and 40 seconds. And I say this as a compliment. It's typically not. I thought it was longer because not that it was bad, but they did so much, and they so much came across in this match. This felt like an old school NWA classic 20-30 minute match. Excellent. I love Ian Riccaboni and Bobby Cruz here because it felt like a nice variety. It felt like we had Ring of Honor making the cameo at an Impact pay-per-view, and it was nice. Like, it felt a little more special with these two companies working together. Great match. I hope we continue to see Gresham defend this belt. I am excited, and I hope Ring of Honor comes back now in some type of form, and I hope they continue to work with Impact.
Yeah, and we'll get a little more into ROH later on the show, but Tasha Steele's backstage, putting over winning that X Division championship, or X Division X. There was a Josh Alexander video package really hyping up this match with Jonah, and they billed it as the walking weapon versus mass destruction. How do you not get into a match like that? I thought Josh Alexander this past year amazed us, and he's just continuing to go on to bigger and better things. This is a match I wouldn't have expected to like as much as I did going in, but it was amazing.
Jonah Rock, too. He was probably really starting to pick up steam in WWE when they let him go. He was one of those guys where he was kind of catching on and then abruptly just let go. Alexander, like you said, was really coming into his own in the last year. So I was wondering how these two would mesh. They both had momentum, but, different styles of wrestlers. It meshed great. This was one of the best Jonah Rock matches I've seen in a while. It was physical. It was badass. It looked like something that Jim Ross would have been calling, like in that 1980s Steiners versus the Samoan SWAT team type style. Physical and brutal.
Oh, 100%. They beat the hell out of each other. Josh Alexander got the win. And what was the time on that match?
Glad you asked. America's #1 source for news, Wikipedia, says it was 17 minutes and 5 seconds.
Now, following this was Eddie Edwards, Heath Rhino, Rich Swann, Willie Mack, backstage promo. This thing was as 1980s as could be. These guys were fired up, and I think it really got you ready for this hardcore war match.
It was different, when you talk about, Eric Bischoff would say, a wrestling pay-per-view or show, you want that buffet, you want something different. The Royal Rumble style, where they're coming out in different, times, it was interesting. It made for an interesting match, and I thought it really brought something. It paid off well. Um, it was cool. I like the baby faces going over, but the big thing was at the end.
Well, before we get to the
All
match,
right.
there was that one promo, and then it was followed by a Violent by Design video promo about Rhino leaving. So between the backstage with the guys hyping up the match and the video promo, it got you ready for the match. Hardcore War was basically a War Games without the cage and one ring. And what were you talking about before?
Well, after Eddie and Swan and Mac and Heath and Rhino and everybody go over, we get the Ring of Honor invasion. It's Matt Taven, Mike Bennett, Maria Kanellis, Vinny, and PCO all show up, and they lay them out, and the crowd's going crazy. And, they're following this up on TV this week, and they're continuing to attack people. But, it's almost separate. It's there's this, these guys are renegades. Gresham represents Ring of Honor. Roxy represents Ring of Honor. Ian Riccaboni, but we don't know what these guys are doing. But there's always that little bit of doubt. So it's an interesting storyline they got developing that started here. And again, after some great matches with the Ring of Honor Championship and Alexander and Jonah, we had this big brawl, and we followed up with a great angle. Man, with the buzz of Mickie being in the Royal Rumble on this pay-per-view, I felt like this was a time where Impact really delivered. They needed to deliver, and I thought they did.
Yeah, PCO signed with them shortly after this, but next they go to Scott D'Amore backstage, basically saying he's got to call Baltimore to see what's going on. So further putting this over, which I loved. You go to Tom and D'Lo at the desk, who are sitting there speculating as to what this means. And then we go to a hype video for Moose, W. Morrissey, and Cardona. And they were really flexing their technical skills for tonight, because this hype video, all the videos were great, but this was very good.
Yeah, it was really good and got you excited about a world championship match.
Yeah, followed by Moose versus W. Morrissey versus Matt Cardona, Impact Heavyweight Championship. How did you enjoy this match?
It was good. It was one of the. It's kind of ironic though. It wasn't a match. So one thing I have to say for the world title match, it wasn't a match that stole the show to me. It was a good, solid match. I enjoyed it, but I was also thinking okay, so the women are going to main event. I'm excited. Going into the show, I think I was most excited for the Ring of Honor World Championship match and the women's world title match after everything we had heard. And then that stayed, but then Jonah Rock and Josh Alexander really, raised up so good that I had to kind of include them in there. And then we had the Ring of Honor invasion. So that's what we're all kind of talking about. So the Impact World Championship match kind of became an afterthought a little bit, I thought.
Yeah, I wrote that the finish felt super gimmicky. It just felt like they were doing a lot of things. There was a prosthetic leg involved.
Yes.
Chelsea Green came out. There was ref bumps. It was all right, but it just felt like too much.
Yeah.
And it just,
bells and whistles.
Yeah, this match didn't stand out. This was followed by a commercial for Rebellion. I'm guessing that's the next big pay-per-view. That's going to be on Saturday, April 23rd, followed by a Deonna Purrazzo, Mickie James video package, and seventh match on the card, Mickie James versus Deonna Purrazzo, Knockouts Women's Championship, Texas Death Match. How did you enjoy this? I thought it was awesome.
I thought it was great. I thought it was awesome. Again, putting the main event spot was so smart. This is the one that people were buzzing about. We wanted to know what's going to happen. And what they did was they really took advantage of the Texas Deathmatch rules to, yes, Mickey's going to keep the belt and go to the Rumble. I think Perazzo was probably originally scheduled to win this. I think they called an audible and they said, hey, we got Mickie James going to the Rumble. Let's take advantage of this. Let's get some promotion for our company and the Impact title. But let's get Perazzo over here strong. And because of the Texas Deathmatch rules, if you notice, Perazzo, before she ended up losing this match, she scored the most decisions. And she had tapped out Mickie like a couple times where the announcers really put over too. Did Mickie tap to like save herself to keep the match going?
Yeah.
And I thought she just looked super strong. I thought both women really showed how good they are. And 19 minutes and 40 seconds to number one news source.
It was interesting to see Roxy at ringside, given what was spoiled for me on Impact this week. I'm going to watch it still. I put this down as another great match. Really good for an Impact main event. And I thought on this event, their women's division sticks out amongst the major companies.
Absolutely. Yeah. In terms of booking and talent, look, talent, WWE's got in spades. AEW, they got a ton of talent, but Impact's got a ton of talent too. And in terms of booking and importance, I really feel like they're kind of making their women feel a little more special right now.
100% now. My standout matches of the card: Mickie James versus Deonna Perazzo, Josh Alexander versus Jonah, Jonathan Gresham versus Chris Sabin, Troy Miguel versus Steve Macklin. Not bad when 4 out of 7 matches are standouts.
Man, I couldn't disagree with any of that. That would have been my exact match order too. Those were definitely the best match of the night. I will make a reference to one thing on the pre-show that I didn't end up seeing, but he wrestled on Impact this week too. Speedball Mike Bailey made his debut for the company, and I had always heard about him. He's phenomenal. Like, he's another guy to watch for, and he's something that made the program this, which I know you haven't seen yet, but he made it even more interesting and compelling this week. Like, I really enjoyed this guy's work.
I'll have to watch that pre-show match. Now, Dave, we don't have anything slated for next week's live show. On the air, I'm going to put you on the spot. What do you want to talk about?
I mean, we could talk a little bit about coming out after the announcement last night, GCW Hammerstein Ballroom. Jon Moxley will be back defending the world title against Homicide.
GCW. So, yeah, we'll talk the GCW Hammerstein event.
I will throw this out there too, just to see what happens this week. I find it very interesting that Mox is coming back and his first match is not with AEW.
No, there's got to be some agreement. I had actually had somebody ask me at work Thursday night, or they said, "Hey, Mox is coming back at the Hammerstein, right?" And I was like, I haven't heard anything about that. Well, because he said Mox versus Homicide. And that's where I was like, ooh, that's interesting, but I haven't heard that yet.
Yeah.
And it's happening. So
let's just say it too. Unfortunate news. Producer Joe, who is scheduled to go to this thing, can't go, finds out he has some commitments he has to make, and he gets a punch in the gut. Like, oh yeah, you're not gonna make it. By the way, Mox is back.
Yeah, that was unfortunate because most GCW pay-per-views, they're on Friday, Saturdays. So I thought I'd be able to do it. And of course, it's on a Sunday night, and I've got one floating holiday. So I didn't use it for my cousin's funeral, but I'm sure as shit going to use it for AEW Dynamite in Bridgeport. Yeah. Thankfully, the job gave me the day off for the funeral.
I will say, I'll throw this out there this week. We'll just see what happens. But I do wonder if Mox will make it a surprise appearance on AEW Dynamite this week, because that's Tony Khan pays him the big money. So we'll see. Maybe not, but I'll be curious to see what happens.
Good chance, right? Now, do you think AJ will be prepared at all to talk about GCW? Or will this catch him completely by surprise, you think?
They just surprised us in a private text last night by actually talking about GCW and asking if I wanted to spoil anything, and he had texted me some stuff separately. I don't know if you caught it on social media, so I won't mention it. But so maybe AJ will be prepared. I will guess if he doesn't read this and we don't say anything to him, no, he will not be prepared.
I mean, everybody pray for AJ. He caught the COVID. That's why I'm sitting in on the live show today. That's why we brought in the big hitters, Kevin Kelton.
Yes,
you got us. We talked Impact. We gave you almost an hour. And we typically do 20 minutes and get out because we got shit to do on a Saturday.
Right.
But guys, thank you for joining us, and we will see you again next week.